In the last video, we ran into a real big nasty error message after we implemented a network request inside of our action creator called fetch posts. So in this video, we're going to start to dig apart or pull apart this error message and really understand what's going on. Now, as I mentioned at the end of the last video, understanding this error message is really key to understanding a lot of stuff in the world of Redux. It's incredibly likely that at some point you might be asked an interview question about what we're going to discuss around this error message as well. So we're going to spend a little bit of time to dive into this error message and really help you understand exactly what's going on. All right, so first off, a diagram. So what's wrong with our fetch post action creator? Well, in reality, there's not one thing that is wrong with it. There's actually two things that are wrong. We're going to first focus on item number 1 right here. So item number 1, this is the first thing that is wrong with our action creator. Our action creators inside of Redux are supposed to return plain JavaScript objects that have a type property and optionally a payload as well. But at present, we are not returning an action from our action creator. Now, when I say that to you, when I say we are not returning a plain JavaScript object, you might flip back over to your code editor and look at this action creator and say, Stephen, are we looking at the same action creator? You might be thinking, it sure looks like we are returning an object with the type property. Well, in fact, no, we're not. Even though it really looks like anytime that we call fetch post right here, we are going to return a JavaScript object, that is not the case. Even though it really looks like it. So let me tell you why. Remember, we spoke much earlier in this course about how all of the code that we write inside of our code editor is ES 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, and so on code. The code that you and I write gets transpiled down to ES 2015 syntax, and that ES 2015 syntax is what actually gets executed inside the browser. So even though this function really looks like it is returning an object with a type property, in fact, after we transpile this to ES 2015 code, we are not. Let me prove that to you, all right? I'm going to remove the comment right here, and then I'm going to highlight everything from const fetch posts down to the bottom of the file. So I'm getting just the function right there, and I'm going to copy that. Then I'm going to flip back over to my browser, and I'm going to open up that tool that we looked at very briefly much earlier called babbljs.io. So this is what is actually transpiling our code down to ES 2015 code. At the top, I'm going to find the try it out button. And then I'm going to paste my code on the left-hand side. Now this is really important. Please make sure that you open up this sidebar over here and enable every single preset that you see. Just turn every single one of them on, like so. All right, then I'm going to collapse that sidebar, and I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here. So inside of our code editor, you think that this is the code that we are executing. But in fact, because we have specifically the async await syntax here, the entire function gets expanded to what you see on the right-hand side, this tremendously large chunk of code. And again, this is all because we are using that async await syntax. If you remove the async await, like so, you see that all that stuff goes away, and we essentially condense down to just the function by itself. So when I say to you, that our action creator is not returning a plain JavaScript object, it is because we have that async await syntax. That is why our action creator is not working as expected. Now I'm going to undo that change and bring that back up. I want to show you why it's not working as expected. On the right-hand side, you can scroll down a little bit. I know that this is a real mash of code, but I just want you to take a glance at something in particular inside of here. So inside of here, you'll see a switch statement. And you'll see that it has cases 0 and case 2 right here. There are some other cases, but I just want to focus on case 0 and case 2 for right now. Notice how in case 0, we return the result of calling JSON placeholder.get. And then in case 2, we're going to eventually kind of return something that looks like it eventually kind of returns our object that we actually care about, the action that we want to eventually send off to all of our different reducers. So I'm going to kind of imagine taking this code chunk right here. I'm going to put it into a diagram and help you understand exactly why this is leading us to a bad result and eventually the error message that we see inside of our browser. Okay, so this diagram is a little bit confusing, but it's a diagram of what is going on when we run our application. I've got a couple of chunks of code inside of each of these boxes. First off, over here, we start at the post list component. We've got that component did mount lifecycle method. Anytime that thing is invoked, it calls this.props.fetch posts. Now, behind the scenes, this step right here is probably happening in the React Redux library. Remember that anytime that we call an action creator, it returns an action, and we must take that action and send it to the dispatch function on our Redux store. And we did that manually back when we were working in that CodePen instance. But then in the last application we worked on, we introduced React Redux. And we had said that React Redux is going to take our action creators when we pass them off to the connect function and kind of wrap them up. So anytime that they get called, they're going to essentially return the action and immediately forward that automatically into the dispatch function. So like I said, this step right here, probably happening somewhere inside the React Redux library. So we call our action creator fetch posts, and then whatever that thing returns, we immediately dispatch it. And so as far as you and I are concerned, when we look at just our code editor and we see just this function right here, you and I are probably thinking, oh, okay, React Redux probably calls this function. And then we make a request right here, and the await keyword does something. We don't really know, but it does something. And then basically right after that, we return an object. That is the ideal flow, and that might be what you think is happening. But in fact, it's not, based upon what we just saw over here. Here's what is actually happening. Now, on the right-hand side, you'll notice I dramatically simplified the code here and just kind of broke it down to that case 0 and case 1. And I think it actually was called case 2, but you get the idea. So this is what is really occurring behind the scenes. Component did mount gets called. We call fetch posts. That calls this kind of imaginary code chunk right here inside of the React Redux library. Our action creator gets called. So this action creator is invoked. And then inside of that super nasty code chunk, at some point in time, we come across that line of code that says return JSON placeholder.get. So we return not our action object when this thing is initially called. When our action creator gets called the very first time, like initially gets called, we do not return the action object. Instead, as you just saw, we have some code inside there that's going to return our request object. That is what gets returned, the request. So we return the request from our action creator, and that goes into the store.dispatch method. Then the Redux store looks at what we returned, and it says, okay, is this a plain JavaScript object with only a type property? Well, in this case, no, because we just returned that request object. We did not return our action. And that's why we ended up seeing this nasty error message over here. It says actions must be plain objects. Use custom middleware for async actions. So the real thing right here is actions must be plain objects. We did not return a plain object. We returned a request object that probably has a bunch of fancy methods assigned to it and probably not a type property. We definitely did not dispatch what we thought we were dispatching. And again, this is all because of the async await syntax that we are using. Okay, so that's kind of issue number 1 with our action creator. Issue number 1 is that because we are using the async await syntax, and that gets transpiled down to ES 2015, or excuse me, ES5 code, what actually runs inside of our browser is not what you think actually runs. And so we currently are running into this issue where we are dispatching a not Redux action. We are dispatching some random object that Redux definitely doesn't care about. So now that we understand that part, we'll take a quick pause right here. When we come back to the next section, we'll talk about the second issue over here. That's going to help you understand why some very easy workaround that you might think would work out is not going to quite work out as well. Okay, so quick pause and I'll see you in just a minute.